Most people think they know the Marvel Universe inside out. However, many things we swear we've known for decades are actually downright false. Let's take a deeper look at some of the most notable misconceptions. It's very easy to see why people think Ghost Rider is a ghost, considering that he's a stunt motorcyclist who transforms into a flaming skeleton. Plus, the word ghost is in his name after all. In reality, though, Johnny Blaze would probably be seriously relieved if his other half were just an innocent ghost. But the troublesome creature he shares his body with is actually a whole lot meaner. Ghost Rider is really a demon named Zarathos who became bonded to Blaze when he made a deal with Marvel's version of the devil, who calls himself Mephisto. This situation is deeply unfortunate for Blaze because Zarathos is one evil SOB. It's equally unfortunate for Zarathos, who would much rather be enslaving the human race or slaughtering innocents instead of following Blaze's less than sadistic marching orders. So while Bruce Banner might think he has it rough, at least the Hulk is a decent, kind soul with an unfortunate temper, unlike this grinning lunatic from hell. Ever since Black Panther blew up at the box office, there's been a meme floating around proclaiming that back when T'Challa's co-creator Jack Kirby was first working on the character, his editors told him that the comic didn't have enough white people in it. Allegedly, Kirby responded by pitting the hero against the Ku Klux Klan in the very next issue. It's a cool story and certainly plausible, because if there's anything Jack Kirby is famous for outside of making comic book characters, it's probably hating Nazis. But while Kirby certainly was an awesome dude, and Black Panther certainly did tear his claws through some racist white hoods in Jungle Action number 19, the meme fudges the details. For one thing, the issue in question didn't hit the stands until 1976, over a decade after T'Challa's creation. Also, the writer wasn't Kirby, but rather Don McGregor. McGregor admitted in a Facebook post that the meme's disregard for the facts does sting a bit, but he's still extremely proud of the story he wrote all those years ago. Of the hundreds of superheroes who have worn an X on their belts, the vast majority have been mutants. However, there's no requirement that one has to be part of an oppressed minority to join the fight for that minority's group's equal rights. And some rather notable X-Men got their powers from crazy scientific accidents rather than genetics. For example, Spider-Man has taught classes at the X-Mansion. There's also the unstoppable Juggernaut, who once did a redemptive tour with the X-Men even though his superhuman strength comes from a magical ruby. Other non-mutants who proudly brandish their X badges include the humanoid sentinel robot Phantom X, an alien bodyguard named Warbird, and Deathlock, that crazy cool cyborg from a dystopian future. Also, don't forget that Deadpool isn't technically a mutant either, as he got his superpowers from some shady Weapon X experimentation. This one is a fun story about copyrights, legal disputes, and other legalese. The Captain Marvel name dispute goes all the way back to the early days of Caped Crusaders, when the now-defunct publisher Fawcett Comics owned a popular superhero named Captain Marvel. That Captain Marvel was a boy named Billy Batson who says the word Shazam and becomes an adult superhero. But Fawcett got in a lot of legal battles with DC Comics, which was then called National Comics, over accusations that Captain Marvel was a Superman ripoff, so the character went kaput in the 1950s. In the following decade, Marvel Comics took off, and its publishers soon realized the perks of having a hero named Captain Marvel. And since the trademark had lapsed on the name, they created the Kree superhero Mar-Vell. He was a man in the comics, although Annette Bening played a reimagined version in the 2019 film. DC ended up obtaining Fawcett Comics, and with that brought back the original Billy Batson hero in the 1970s. But since Marvel had trademarked the name, DC could only market their Batson stories as Shazam. Long story short, 40 years of Shazam marketing led to everyone thinking that the hero's name actually was Shazam. In the 2010s, DC finally just renamed their hero Shazam, while Marvel officially settled on Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. There might be no phrase in comic book history as iconic as "with great power comes great responsibility," the parting lesson that Ben Parker left his soon-to-be guilt-stricken nephew Peter. While it's now universally accepted that Uncle Ben was the one who gave this good advice to the future Spider-Man, it didn't start out that way. While the mantra does pop up at the end of Spidey's first appearance in Amazing Fantasy number 15, it's contained inside a narration panel. In other words, the one saying it is the book's narrator, not Ben. As researched by comic book resources, the phrase was first attributed to Uncle Ben in, weirdly enough, a 1972 rock-omic album before finally reaching the mainstream comics universe in the 1980s. That's a pretty significant gap, considering how closely Ben has been tied to the quote in the public mind. Nevertheless, ever since Cliff Robertson brought tears to everyone's eyes in 2002's Spider-Man, the phrase has definitely belonged to Ben, regardless of whether he had it to start with.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Be afraid of the Hulk all you want, but when it comes down to it, perhaps the most dangerous Avenger is the former Russian assassin known as Natasha Romanoff, aka the Black Widow. Natasha's martial arts skills, agility, and weapons proficiency are more than enough to take out the average bad guy. But it's a common misconception that she doesn't possess any superpowers. In actuality, she has a number of metahuman abilities, even if they are low-key. Remember that creepy red room that was alluded to in Avengers Age of Ultron? That's the Soviet brainwashing facility that turned Natasha into the Black Widow. It turns out that she wasn't just put through intense and abusive training procedures there. In the comics, she was also injected with a Russian version of the super soldier serum flowing through Captain America's veins. Clearly, this copycat serum wasn't as crazy powerful as the original invention, since you don't see Natasha curling helicopters. But it did gift her with enhanced strength, durability, stamina, disease resistance, and slowed aging. Pretty much any classic version of the Fantastic Four is composed of four main personalities: super genius Reed Richards, compassionate Sue Storm, fiery Johnny Storm, and gruff old Ben Grimm. But keeping the same roommates together for even a few years can be a challenge, and the Fantastic Four have been fighting since the 1960s, so it's no big surprise that their lineup occasionally gets shaken up. These changes never last, of course, but they do happen. Some of the most notable heroes who have joined the Fantastic Four, at least for a little while, include Luke Cage, She-Hulk, Ant-Man, and Medusa. That's not even mentioning Reed and Sue's two kids, Franklin and Valeria, who are cosmic powerhouses on their own. Maybe the team should try out a more accurate name, like the Fantastic 4000 or the Fantastic Revolving Doors. Of course, one time they did drop the number scheme altogether and simply called their adventurous organization the Future Foundation. Perhaps the weirdest Fantastic Four lineup of all time was a team comprised of Spider-Man, Wolverine, Hulk, and Ghost Rider. Yes, that really happened. You can be forgiven for thinking that the world's most lovable talking tree only says, "I am Groot," and nothing else. After all, no matter what the situation is, pretty much every word from his mouth sounds like, "I am Groot." However, Groot doesn't have limited intelligence. Those who are around him long enough, or who have practiced Groot speak to a sufficient degree, eventually learn to understand the tiny inflections of his language, thus demonstrating that he's actually quite chatty. In the MCU movies, for example, Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn has openly translated many of both Groot and Baby Groot's utterances. The most heartbreaking example is probably the fact that the younger Groot's final line in Avengers Infinity War, as he's fading away and reaching towards Rocket, translates to Dad. In the comics, Jean Grey has used her telepathic abilities to translate Groot's thoughts into English. And it turns out that the big lug actually says some pretty deep, beautiful, and philosophical things. Although he has also revealed that he really dislikes Latvians. So it's a good thing Dr. Doom wasn't listening. Another group myth that needs to get busted is that lots of people seem to think that in the MCU, Baby Groot is a resurrected version of original Groot. But James Gunn has made it clear on multiple occasions that the younger Groot is actually Groot's son.
I am Groot. I am not boring, you're boring.
What makes the X-Men such an enduring franchise is that their stories are so often centered on a core theme that cuts to the heart of society. They are members of an oppressed minority group fighting against bigotry, hatred, and prejudice. There's no doubting the inherent political allegories that fuel Marvel's mutant heroes, and the X-Men saga has often drawn deliberate parallels from real history. 1982's God Loves, Man Kills, for example, is perhaps the most celebrated X-Men story of all time, and it's also the one that tackles these issues most directly. However, not every major X-Men story has been about bigotry. For example, the classic Dark Phoenix saga, often heralded as one of the most iconic X-Men stories ever, doesn't have much to do with the whole human-mutant struggle. At its heart, it's a parable about the corrupting influence of power, in this case, the power given to one of the first widely popular female superheroes. While prejudice doesn't play a big part in this story, there are important feminist themes throughout. Meanwhile, the X-Men have also been involved in a number of wacky cosmic and extra-dimensional tales. There was the time they got infected by some parasitic aliens called the Brood. plus the humorous crossover they did with the original 1960s Star Trek crew. You could probably find things in them that seem like political or cultural statements, but really, they're just fun action stories. Johnny Storm gets all the credit, but he's actually the second superhero to call himself the Human Torch. Decades before Johnny was shouting "Flame on," the original version of the character premiered all the way back in 1939 on the cover of Marvel Comics #1, and he was arguably the publisher's first breakout superhero. But while this torch flew around and threw fireballs with the best of them, his powers had nothing to do with cosmic rays. Rather, he was an android who accidentally gained sentience, caused some nasty destruction, and then vowed to save humanity. The Torch teamed up with Captain America a lot and played a key role in Marvel's version of World War II. Though we'll probably never see the android Torch spark a flame on the big screen, he does still exist in a way in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In Captain America: The First Avenger, one of the displays at the World's Fair is a synthetic man in a familiar red costume. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.